America today is a powerful economy. It's home to the world's largest companies, Silicon Valley startups. It boasts the world's mightiest military. The United States Armed Forces are among the most modern and disciplined in the world. Democracy and principles. The country adheres to values of freedom, equality, and the right to self-determination. How did the British colonies manage to gain their independence and become one of the most successful and desirable countries in the world? In the 18th century, the British Empire had 13 colonies on the eastern coast of North America. Discontent and pressure that led to the American Revolution were influenced by several factors. After Britain's victory in the 7 Years' War, all French colonies in North America were annexed to Britain. The British government, no longer in need of support from American colonists, began to exploit them intensively by implementing restrictive laws and imposing new taxes and duties. The British Parliament imposed taxes on America, yet they had no representatives in this parliament to express their interests and protest decisions. This caused irritation and discontent among American colonists who saw it as a violation of their rights. In Massachusetts, a famous phrase attributed to James Otis and later becoming a slogan in the struggle was uttered: "Taxation without representation is tyranny," which transformed into the shorter slogan, "No taxation without representation." Secondly, the colonists felt increasingly alienated from mainland Britain, and conflicts were intensifying. Consider the distance from Britain to America at the time, and the journey across the ocean was challenging and lengthy. Communication between the colonies and the metropolis was expensive and inefficient. Lastly, ideas of freedom, human rights, and the limitation of power served as a source of inspiration for many Americans, contributing to the idea of the need to fight for their rights and freedom. Tensions escalated when Christopher Sider, an 11-year-old boy, was killed by soldiers on February 22, 1770. Christopher is considered the first victim of the American Revolution. His death and the subsequent increase in press propaganda added fuel to the fire of mutual hatred between soldiers and townspeople. Patriot groups sought opportunities to attack royal soldiers, who in turn desired the same. On March 5, 1770, the Boston Massacre occurred, essentially starting with a minor incident. During the clash, soldiers shot and killed 3 Bostonians, while 11 others were wounded, with 2 later dying from their injuries. The Boston Massacre forced England to repeal all taxes, except the tax on tea, which the colonists did not resist, but rather turned to smuggling. In 1773, the British Parliament passed the Tea Act, which reduced the price of legally taxed tea, making it competitive with smuggled Dutch tea. Ships carrying tea were sent to America, and responsible consignees were appointed to combat smuggling. On December 16, a group led by Samuel Adams seized the tea-laden ships and threw the tea into the sea. This event marked a significant surge in national pride and intensified the independence movement. Decades later, this event became known as the Boston Tea Party, and in response, the government imposed what were known as the Intolerable Acts. The Intolerable Acts were primarily aimed at strengthening Britain's control over the American colonies. 4 out of the 5 acts were a response to the Boston Tea Party. Through these acts, the King and Parliament intended to halt the growing resistance movement in the colonies. However, these measures only worsened the situation, as the colonists saw them as a violation of their rights. The Intolerable Acts prompted the convening of the First Continental Congress, whose aim was to take measures to resist the policies imposed by the metropolis. Among the delegates at the Congress was one of the 7 representatives from Virginia, and the future President of the United States, George Washington. A decision was made to declare a trade boycott with the metropolis, starting from December 1, 1774. Both the purchase of English goods and the sale of American goods to the English were prohibited. A decision was also made to convene the Second Continental Congress on May 10, 1775. The volume of goods imported into the American colonies from Britain in 1775 plummeted by 97% compared to 1774. This immediately triggered a response from the metropolis. King George III of Britain demanded the complete submission of the colonies to the authority of the British Crown, and the English fleet began blockading the northeastern coast of the American continent. The First Continental Congress, and particularly London's reaction to its decisions, convincingly demonstrated to the Americans that they could not rely on the favor of the British Crown and its lenient attitude towards their demands for independence. The crisis escalated, and by 1775, it erupted into the War for Independence. In February 1775, both houses of the British Parliament, in their address to the King, acknowledged the existence of a rebellion. In April 1775, British General Gage issued a secret order to his troops to disarm the rebels, arrest their leaders, and destroy the weapons depot located in nearby Concord. When the colonists learned about these plans, they sent riders to warn the local residents about the approaching troops. Upon receiving the news, the rebel leaders went into hiding, but in Lexington, when Roops attempted to disband the militia, a confrontation broke out, resulting in the deaths of 8 Americans. Government forces lost up to 300 people killed, and upon their return to Boston, they found themselves under siege. These events, known as the Battles of Lexington and Concord, marked the first armed clashes in the struggle. In May 1775, the Second Continental Congress adopted truly revolutionary decisions, including the proclamation of an independent government. An army was formed from the Boston militia and the surrounding areas, led by the respected Virginia landowner George Washington. The fight began, which Americans called the Revolutionary War, and the British named the American War of Independence. In July 1776, the Continental Congress voted for separation and adopted the Declaration of Independence, written by Thomas Jefferson. The Declaration condemned the tyranny of George III and proclaimed the right of all people to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. The 13 former colonies became known as the United States of America. The British surrendered on October 19, 1781. Essentially, the American War for Independence was coming to an end. British forces remained in New York for another 2 years, but hostilities were directed against the French and outside the United States. In September 1783, the Treaty of Paris was signed, recognizing the independence of the United States of America.